Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as Ethiopia's conflict with the fighters of the northern state of Tigray continues to send thousands across the border into Sudan, we hear from our correspondent in a refugee camp there about the urgent scramble to look after fleeing civilians. Also, in Uganda, opposition presidential candidate Bobi Wine is once again arrested, sparking protests that have left 3 dead. Authorities accuse him of having failed to follow coronavirus measures at his rallies. He says that he's been politically persecuted once again. And Burkina Faso heads to the polls this weekend. Outgoing President Roch Kaboré is running for a second term. We take a look back on his economic balance sheet after 5 years heading the country. But first, both sides in Ethiopia's internal war were claiming victory on Wednesday. Federal forces have been battling the troops of the Tigray People's Liberation Front for 3 weeks now. On Wednesday, arrest warrants were issued for 76 army officers accused of treason and of conspiring with the TPLF, a move that will further escalate tensions between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the well-armed northern state that he has accused of having mounted an armed revolt. More than 36,000 people have fled the violence and crossed over into Sudan. The sudden refugee crisis has left aid agencies scrambling to get the supplies it needs to civilians that need them. France 24's Bastien Renouy is on the border in Rakoba refugee camp.
In this refugee camp, up to 1,300 people arrive every day. It's being built by the Sudanese government and by the UN to welcome up to 20,000 people within the next weeks if the fighting in Tigray continues. Most of these people had to escape their house and villages very quickly when the fighting started. They all talk about bombings, about airstrike, about gunshots, about civilian killings, either by the army, by militias, or even by gangs. They had to work for days, sometimes, to arrive here. Most of them had to work at night to avoid airstrikes. They couldn't carry any belonging with them. Most of them just have their clothes. They don't have anything to build shelters. They don't have mattress. They don't have any blanket. They need help from local and international NGOs. They need help from the UN. And these organizations are starting to bring food, to bring shelters here at the border with Ethiopia. Here is a report I shot in Hamdayet refugee camp next to the border with Ethiopia. It's one of the main entry points into the country for these refugees.
It's 5:30 a.m. These Ethiopian refugees wake up after a night spent on the ground without shelter to protect themselves. Some are waiting for a UN bus to transfer them to a new camp. They would give anything to leave the city of Hamdayet.
We are in the desert. You'll see. The night was so cold. But we only expect from the people, from the government, food and sheltering. Those things are basic and fundamental things to the person.
At midday, new refugees are arriving in large numbers. The region is particularly difficult to access. NGOs are slowly setting up and getting ready to help an increasing number of refugees. This organization quickly built latrines for several thousand people.
التبرز في العراء ده مشاكل جمة يعني حسي لو شايفين احنا من جينا الناس دي بتبرز في العراء كانوا فكل الحاجات دي بتنزل في الخور السكريته دي بتنزل في الخور وبتنزل في المويه بتاعتهم اللي بيشربوها فدي بتسبب لهم امراض كثيره حتى للناس الغاطنين.
Since the beginning of the conflict, Sudanese organizations started collecting funds from the local population.
هذه المجتمعات ساهمت مساهمة كبيرة جدا في مجال تغذية اللاجئين وطالبي اللجوء وبعد ذلك طبعا جاءت المنظمات استلمت هذا البرنامج منظمة WFP ومنظمة مسلم إيد.
5:30 p.m. a meal is being served for hundreds of people. This will allow them to hold up until they are transferred to a permanent camp. As the night settles in, temperatures are falling again. The Sudanese government is expecting that 200,000 Ethiopians could cross the border in the coming weeks.
That report by Bastien Renouy and Maria Gerth Nicolescu. In other news, Uganda police say that at least 3 people have died in protests that broke out in Kampala on Wednesday after presidential hopeful Bobi Wine was arrested once again. The musician and opposition leader is trying to unseat President Yoweri Museveni, who's been in power since 1986. Wine's been detained multiple times since he first burst onto the political scene back in 2017. Nicholas Romain has more.
Once again, Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine has been arrested, this time in the eastern town of Luka. The arrest sparked protests across the country and the police said 3 people have died. Ugandan police said Wine was arrested because he had continuously violated electoral guidelines on COVID-19, because he'd held rallies and processions hosting more than the recommended 200 people per campaign venue. Bobi Wine is a pop star in Uganda. He only became a lawmaker 3 years ago. But many Ugandans say they will vote for him in January's presidential election. His main rival will be Yoweri Museveni, who's been in power for 34 years. This is what Wine said about Museveni back in June.
We are not each other's enemies. We know our enemy, we know the enemy of Uganda, and that is Museveni and his regime of national shame. So the more we fight against each other, we are delaying the change that Ugandans so desperately want.
Museveni is running for a 6th term. He came to power in 1986, which makes him one of Africa's longest-serving presidents. Museveni is 76, while Wine is only 38. With only 2 months to go before the election, analysts say the ruling party is worried that the singer-turned-politician's popularity keeps on growing.
Well, Ghana has denied accusations that President Nana Akufo-Addo tried to pressure an anti-corruption prosecutor to shelve a report into the controversial sale of gold royalties. Special prosecutor Martin Amidu quit on Monday, accusing Akufo-Addo of political interference. Now, the spat comes just 3 weeks before presidential elections. Ghana is one of the continent's most stable democracies, but corruption is a recurring problem. And South Africa's president and U.S. President-elect Joe Biden say that they are hoping to boost relations between Washington and African nations. The 2 leaders spoke by phone earlier this week. Ramaphosa is also the chairperson of the African Union, and he said that during the call, they mentioned that Biden saw Africa as being a major player in international affairs and the advancement of multilateralism. Biden was declared winner of the November 3rd U.S. election, but current President Donald Trump still has not conceded defeat. Now, Burkina Faso goes to the polls on Sunday. Outgoing President Roch Kaboré is running for a 2nd term. A look back now on his economic balance sheet after 5 years of heading the country.
This huge field of solar panels is symbolic of the Kaboré years. Thanks to solar power, Burkina Faso's energy production has increased, bringing power to at least 175 rural communities and to delivery rooms like this one up and down the country.
Il était très difficile pour ces équipes d'infirmiers de recevoir des femmes enceintes la nuit parce que tout se faisait avec des torches. C'était pas du tout pratique et ça mettait même des vies en danger.
The country was also able to build this gigantic interchange in its capital, Ouagadougou. However, at macroeconomic level, Burkina Faso has suffered the direct consequences of the security crisis, according to its Minister of Economy.
Quand nous prenons depuis 2015, donc 2016 à aujourd'hui, nous avons eu un taux de croissance moyen de 5,8 sur la période. Il y a eu des moments où nous avons dépassé les 6% de taux de croissance. Ce taux de croissance moyen a été beaucoup impacté, il faut le dire, par la crise économique qui, bien sûr, la crise sécuritaire du moins, qui en 2019 a fait chuter un peu notre taux de croissance qui est ressorti autour de 5,3%.
Tahiru Barry was a minister at the start of President Roch Kaboré's mandate. Now he's also running in the presidential election. He's very critical of the current government.
Aujourd'hui, on a appris à mentir par des chiffres au Burkina Faso. On nous a parlé de 18 000 milliards pour le PNDS. Ça a été la désillusion. On a parlé de 150 000 emplois à créer. Aujourd'hui, c'est la désillusion pour tous ces jeunes diplômés.
6.5 million voters are expected to turn out at the polling stations on November 22nd. Despite a mixed economic record, outgoing President Roch Kaboré is confident he'll be re-elected in the first round.
And finally, the winner of the UK's prestigious Booker Prize will be announced on Thursday evening. It's a tense wait for all of the 6 authors shortlisted. Amongst them is Tsitsi Dangarembga. She was the first black woman in Zimbabwe to have a book published in English. And her latest, This Mournable Body, is the third in a trilogy that follows a young girl in post-colonial Rhodesia through to womanhood in 21st century Zimbabwe. Well, she spoke to France 24 about how much this acknowledgement of her creative and personal voice means to her.
I cannot tell you how much it means because I've been writing for over 3 decades and I've never had this kind of recognition before. So I'm really happy that I have it now. And it's really changed my life. I now have an agent for the first time, someone who really wants to promote my work and is interested in my work. In terms of the artistic community and the writing community in Zimbabwe, that is a difficult one. Zimbabwe is under a lot of repression at the moment, and that means that only some people are recognized as the legitimate representatives of art and culture and literature. And so I am not one of them. What I do hope that this will do, though, is that my nomination will inspire other Zimbabweans to show that even if you don't have your own country behind you and the resources that would be useful for your career, there are ways that you can just persevere and continue and make things happen for yourself.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.